Welcome to Relatively Famous, the podcast where I, Chip White, interview relatives of famous people. Vanna White of Wheel of Fortune is my sister, and that's why I have this podcast. I love talking with other relatives of famous people and finding out what their life is like. Are they similar to mine? Are they different to mine? You know, what's it like for them to stand on their own in the sunshine outside the shadow of their relative? Now, we grew up in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I still go there and visit all the time. It's an amazing family-friendly vacation spot. I met so many families growing up. When I go back and visit, I still get to see so many families and friends having a great time. There's 60 miles of beach. There's 30 plus mini golf courses, Broadway at the beach. There's Swamp Fox, or the rides as we call them. There's Skywheel. There's so much family friendly stuff to do in Myrtle Beach. And if you have an autistic or sensory sensitive child, it's okay because Myrtle Beach has pledged to be a sensory friendly destination. And if you want to know more about it, go to visitmyrtlebeach.com. That's visitmyrtlebeach.com. Find out all about all the cool things to do in Myrtle Beach. Now, my next guest tonight is, I say family friendly because her grandfather has probably the most family watched Christmas movie of all time. Her grandfather is Frank Capra, who directed It's a Wonderful Life. Today we get to meet his granddaughter, Christina Capra.
Relatively Famous podcast with Chip White.
Christina, welcome to Relatively Famous. I'm super excited to have you on because I'm a huge fan of your grandfather's work and your dad's. I think your grandfather's I know better. And I'm looking forward to finding out about your work.
Thanks for having me today, Chip.
It's exciting. So tell me, I know that from doing my research, what little bit I usually do, that your grandfather passed away before you were born, correct?
I think I was about 3 years old when he passed away. But
Okay.
yes, I was. I didn't get the chance to know him personally. I have some memories of. He lived at La Quinta when he later in life, and I have some memories of him being in a wheelchair, and I have a lot of memories of his little dogs because he had a couple Cocker Spaniels that were really cute and friendly.
Now we're going to talk a lot about your career, but I am a little fascinated because you're my first granddaughter on the show. And when did it kind of come to you like, wow, your grandfather, was a big deal? I mean, he 6 Academy Awards, I believe, or 6 nominations. So kind of
Yes.
when did it really connect with, like, oh my gosh, my grandfather, and of course, then your father?
Well, I would say my dad was really a charismatic and friendly and open person, and I think from a young age, I noticed that people would come up to him, even in restaurants or what have you, and just want to say hello. And he was always very gracious and would always take time to talk to anybody. He was just very open, and so I kind of recognized through my dad that, from a young age that, my grandfather was really well known. And my dad, he said that he knew from a young age because he had a very different upbringing than many people back in, that period of time. There were a lot of, I guess, kidnappings going around of wealthy people or famous people's children. So my dad said that even when he would go on the beach, there would be, guards with machine guns guarding him and his brother and sister. So that was definitely a different experience, I'm sure.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of probably around like the Lindbergh baby time and stuff. Now, and your dad, being from the South Carolina coast, and I am, Wilmington, North Carolina. I remember when the big studio came out there, EUE and Screen Gems. So your dad ran that for a while. So you kind of also grew up in the film environment, right?
Yes, I did. I was kind of a hellion at that studio, I think. My dad kind of encouraged it. He just let me roam free and I would run around and I would love to visit. I had all my favorites. I would go and visit the sets and the prop masters, and I would go run around on the back lot and drive the golf cart, and you know, I just loved it. The magic of film always attracted me, and as a young, girl, it was like the best playground in the world. I remember like the Muppets from Space set was so cool and fun. And the Black Knight was filmed there, and they built a very realistic castle with a working moat and drawbridge. And that was just a fantastic set.
What what really attracted you to being there, to maybe wanting to pursue this later? How was, because I know you were in California, then in Wilmington, kind of run me through a little bit of your life.
Sure. I didn't always set out to be a filmmaker. I was more attracted to maybe science, and I was thinking I would be a biologist or something when I was little. And my dad, he encouraged any and all of my ambitions. Actually, you have to envision his office at the studio was, prestigious looking. And, for a period of time, I was conducting an experiment with a bunch of mice, and he let them stay in his office. So he had a couple tanks of my mice in
That's
there.
pretty
My mom
funny.
didn't really want them in the house, but he was like, well, I guess they'll be in my office. So he was very supportive. And, I guess I was maybe just graduating high school when he got sick, and he ended up passing away, shortly thereafter from prostate cancer. It was really difficult for me because I had just a year previously lost my older sister, Emery, who I was very, very close with. And so it was a really difficult time. And we ended up moving to North Carolina, and I got a scholarship to go to UNCW. And I think it was important for me personally to go to UNCW because my dad had taught there. And so I ended up getting to know a lot of those professors, and they had really known my dad well. And so it was a nice way for me to stay connected, with my dad. And I started out taking biology and things like that. And I met the former chair of the UNCW film department. His name was Lou Bettino, and he was an older Italian man. And he was so nice and passionate about film. And he's like, Christina, you've got to take at least some film classes, for electives. And I said, yeah, of course. And I started taking the film classes, and I just fell in love with them, you know, um, the history of cinema. And I was specifically drawn to kind of the different art movements and how they affected and influenced different film movements. And I was just fascinated by that. Like German Expressionist art, I always was drawn to, and then German Expressionist film really captivated me. And I just realized that I really wanted to be a filmmaker. And so, I majored in film, and I took every class I could possibly take and graduated. And I really haven't looked back.
What's been some of the projects that you've worked on, and how did you kind of get them off the ground? Because I can share my experience with you in a minute, but I want to hear how you. You at least took the film classes. I kind of went out cold. How do you get a project going? How did you start your film career?
um, I started my film career uh, basically making short films because they were accessible. And I was working part time at an art gallery because I also love art when I graduated. And I got to know a lot of the artists, the local artists in Wilmington, and some of them were just phenomenal. And so I was tasked with one summer of mentoring a few gallery interns. And I was like, well, I'm not sure what I'll do with them. I guess we'll just make a film. because that was more in my wheelhouse, having just graduated from college myself. And we set out and we made a short film about Elizabeth Darrow, who was a phenomenal local artist, and entered it into Cucaloris on a whim, and it got accepted, and we're really happy about that. And I've continued to make a few short films with Jessie Robertson, who was one of those interns, and she taught herself how to edit, and she's really fantastic at it. And so we made a short film last year called Karen Crouch in the Land of Make Believe, which was focusing on another local artist, a bronze welder. And her story was really interesting because she was a prominent trial attorney and gave up her career in law to pursue a career in art. And it was fantastic. And I submitted that film pretty widely to film festivals, and it was accepted to quite a few, and it had a great little run, and I was really proud of it. And then this year we've come out with kind of a little bit more of an ambitious film. It's 21 minutes long, and it's called Lived in Bodies, and it's about the artist Virginia Wright Frierson, and she's done really interesting projects throughout her life. She was hired by Columbine High School after the tragedy to do a just ginormous mural for the high school. And they had a lot of really interesting older footage of her working on that really lent itself to the documentary. And that documentary is circulating the film festival circuit right now and doing really well. So
That's amazing. With a name like Capra, and you said you kind of really weren't interested in the film business at first. Did people automatically kind of go, well, you kind of got no choice. You have to go down that road at some point. Or were you kind of always, I'm not going to go into that. I mean, I'm going to make my own stand in my own, like you said, biology or something like that. Does that make sense?
yeah, I was never well, I guess I was never pressured by my family to do, any particular thing. I mean, my dad was really hopeful that I would go to college, which I did. And, because education was really important to him. And, from there, I just sort of made my own decisions. One thing he did say kind of during the time when he was sick, and he hadn't really talked about it much before then, but he had said, he was working on a project to get another film studio off the ground. And he was like, yeah, I just want somewhere, for you to be able to make your films. And I was like, Dad, I'm not sure I'm going to do that. But,
Yeah.
I think he was very hopeful that I would do that as well. But the passion really struck me, like I said, in college. And the history of cinema was so fascinating. And I'm such a fan of some of those early directors, including my grandfather. So it was really fun to study him alongside some of those other directors.
Yeah, I think A Wonderful Life is what sticks out in most people's mind today because, of course, it plays endlessly at Christmas, and it's just an amazing film. But, he's 6 nominated films. It Happened One Night, Mr. Deed Goes to Town, You Can't Take It With You, U.S. Signal Corps, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, several of these films. You said your sister passed away not long before your dad. I know it had to be extremely tough to lose a sibling. What was that period of life like for you? And was she interested in film more than you were prior to going to college?
So my sister was from my mom's first marriage. So she was, I mean, technically my half sister, but it certainly, my dad loved her just so much, and she certainly thought of my dad as another dad to her. But my sister was about 10 years older than I am, and she never had any ambitions to go into the film industry. She was really looking more into trying to go into psychology or something. She wanted to help people who suffered from addiction, which is what she ultimately passed away from. So her, most of her adult life was just, rehab and just sort of fighting that addiction. But she was such a spiritual and just really lovely person, and everyone who knew her, was better for it. She she was very fascinated and really felt a kinship to Janis Joplin, which was interesting because she even got Janis's tattoo of roses on her wrist, and it's just interesting because they both ended up passing away at the age of 27. Um, she kind of burned brightly and burned out, I guess, quickly.
Yeah, that 27 club is a interesting club. Um, yeah, I feel for you. Being a recovered drug and alcohol addict and alcoholic myself, it's a tough road, not only for the person but for the family. And my condolences to losing your sister, even though it's been a while, but heartfelt. When so what took you from Wilmington to Charlotte, and kind of what's on your path? I know I want to talk a little bit about Poster Girls, but kind of lead me to what took you to where you are now.
Well, we just sort of decided to move to a bigger city. Right around the time I graduated from college in Wilmington, the film industry really took a big hit, really in all of the state of North Carolina, but especially in Wilmington because that's where most of the things were filmed at the time. And the projects just really dried up, and it was kind of one of those situations where I either needed to move to Atlanta or LA, somewhere they were more actively making film to pursue it. And that wasn't really an option for me at the time because I lived with my mom and she was disabled, and I ended up losing her a few years ago. And that was really, really hard, obviously. And but it seemed like this was the right time then to more pursue that career that I was looking for. And I thought, Charlotte's a bigger city. It's close to Atlanta. It's also close to Wilmington and International Airport. And it just felt like a good move. And I think it really was because, I met Meredith, and Poster Girls was just such a phenomenal story. And I think it's just incredibly timely and very marketable. And, I know women and the industry, they need more of these stories that are, uplifting and female driven. And this one particularly has a big ensemble, female cast would be, an incredible film, an incredible story.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to, because you wrote the script, so now you're a writer, and I'm looking forward to actually reading, because I read the book, and I remember saying to Marathon, this makes it would make a great story. It is very female driven. It needs a female director. I think if you get the right person, it's going to be a hit, and I truly hope that you're able to make it happen. And I'm kind of stumbling on that one. But why do you think that it's important to make this story for you?
I was pretty drawn to I guess, the main characters of Maggie and Cora. I think that they are very positive role models, and I think that they would be a positive role model for younger women who might be watching this, because they deal with so much adversity, but they deal with it with such grace. Um, and it's just really impressive. And I think it's a very positive kind of look. And not to say that they don't have their flaws. A good character has flaws, but they constantly overcome these situations that they're put in, and they just do it with aplomb. And I'm blown away by them. And I love the little aspects of comedy that are in this film as well. I think, a little bit of that levity is so important. And it's the kind of film that really makes you feel something. I remember watching an interview with my grandfather, and he was receiving a little bit of criticism for his films being perhaps too sentimental. And he said, well, without sentimentality, what is there? There's nothing. He said, films are supposed to make you feel something. And I think this one overall would really resonate with a lot of people, and it would make them feel empowered. And I think that's just really important.
Yeah, your grandfather had a truth in that statement too, because if you don't feel something from I'm a big fiction guy. I'm not huge on documentaries, but I just want a really good story to me. It's like, and I got to feel something at the end of it. And we'd had this conversation earlier. Your grandfather in the business and your father both cast a really big shadow. You're just starting out, and I know you had mentioned you were kind of shy about using the Capra name, and I told you, use it, honey, go for it. How do you think that, or why do you feel that it is kind of a shadow hindrance, but also a very positive thing? And how do you stand out as, yourself and in a world of, in the world of movies, which are huge, and you have a big name behind you?
Well, I'm definitely very grateful to have that name and to have the family that I did. My dad and my mom, loved me so much and wished for me to do so well. And I just hope that I make my dad proud. That's important to me. I've always wanted to make him proud, and I think he would be really proud right now. Um, but yeah, it's. I hope that the name will help to open some doors, and I'd be very appreciative of that. I don't want to be seen as a nepo baby or what have you, but if it can help, I think that's a good thing, and I would be very grateful for that kind of help as well, to get something like this off the ground. But I've also tried to sort of make my own way. I mean, I went to film school. I think that's important to educate yourself, and I really applied myself there, and was very successful. And I've written this script myself. I'm producing this film myself, and I'm trying to, get it off the ground as best as I can.
So, Christina, what or who, I know it was your dad, some of the studio, who gave you or has given you probably the best filmmaking advice that you take to heart and you really think is helpful in your career?
That's a great question. Well, I had a professor. He was my professor for a few different directing classes in college, and his name was Chip Hackler, and he was a phenomenal professor. But one thing that always stuck with me was he would always say, we try and find the love in every film and in every scene. And I think that's really interesting, and it goes back to what I was saying about film making you feel something, and the sentiment of film being something that is really ultimately a good thing. And so it was interesting to watch films from that perspective, and like, how is this each scene, even in films you wouldn't expect, how does this scene actually come back to love and that emotion? And I don't know, it's powerful.
We're getting close to running out of time, and this is kind of a question I like to. Well, it's the last question I usually ask everybody. What did I not ask, or what do you really want to share? What question did I not ask, or is there something that you really want to share? Does that make sense?
It does. Well, I guess I could maybe talk slightly more about Poster Girls. And I guess if it's a sort of a fresh take on Rosie the Riveter, which I think is such an iconic and powerful image, that would resonate with a wide audience. And it's about a group of women who are working in a Southern wartime munitions factory, during the 1940s. So they are the Rosie the Riveters, but it's a diverse group of women. And I think that's so important because, the early Rosie the Riveter film, it really only had white uh, actors, and that just wasn't the reality. Um, these these munitions factories employed, tons of Black people, white people, and honestly, many of them, almost most of the employees were women. So it's interesting how history has kind of, not only whitewashed the fact that many of them were Black, but also that many of them were women in general. So I think this story is kind of due, and I think it's a story that should be told and needs to be told.
How did you meet Meredith, real quick?
Meredith reached out to me with her book, and there's a beautiful cover art for that book of a Black woman depicted as Rosie the Riveter. It's a beautiful watercolor, and it had me from the cover. I was like, well, I'm gonna have to look into this book. And when I read it, I was like, this is just incredible, and I really, really, want to see it get made.
Okay, last question. From a director's eye, what's your favorite film of your grandfather that he directed and one that your dad produced?
Oh, okay. Gosh, my grandfather. I mean, I would say Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is my favorite. I think that was such a powerful story, and also I just really, really enjoyed the cinematography and the acting, especially that scene at the Lincoln Memorial. That scene I thought was just phenomenal, and just the cinematography was so impressive. Um, and as far as my dad, I have to say I love the original Planet of the Apes
Yeah.
series. He had some fun stories about that. He actually kept a couple of those masks that were used in that film, and they were extremely lifelike. I mean, they really looked like ape faces, beautifully crafted. And one mask, one time we were driving around in the middle of nowhere in a desert, basically, and he gets one of those masks out of the back of the car, and he puts it on his head, and he's cut out eye holes in the back of the mask. And he's actually like just joking around driving with the monkey face on the back, or the ape face is on the back of his head, and he's like leaning out the window so the people behind us saw an ape face looking back at them driving. It was just fun. My dad was honestly a big jokester, and he had such a great sense of humor. So that's definitely a memory for me.
Oh, that's good. I can picture that in my head. Um, and I'm pretty much out of time. Was there anything? Was there a question that I didn't ask you that you want to touch on?
No, I feel like we talked about a lot of great things. I'm really, really thankful for you having me on this show.
I'm honored. Again, I've been a fan of your grandfather's and your father's work for years. And when Meredith said, you need to talk to Christina, I'm like, I'm in. She's in. I'm on. Give me her number. Well, I want to thank you for spending your time with us today, and we'll hopefully see your work on the big screen soon.
All right, I hope so. All right, thank you so much, Chip.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina. That was an amazing story. I can't wait to see Poster Girls on the big screen. I'm going to be excited to follow your career. There's going to be another Capra up there getting some Oscars soon. I know it. Now, remember, if you want to have a fun, family-friendly vacation, go to visitmyrtlebeach.com. That's visitmyrtlebeach.com, all one word, and help plan your fun family vacation. I want to thank them for their support, them being visitmyrtlebeach.com. I want to thank Nelco Media, my partner in making this happen, Nelco Comics in San Antonio for a really cool set. And I want to thank you, the viewer, the listener, for tuning in. I couldn't do it without you, and I'm humbled and grateful that you take the time to spend with us. And if you know someone famous or you happen to be related to someone famous, reach out to us. Who knows? We may be telling your story.
You've been listening to Relatively Famous with Chip White. Please like and subscribe to Relatively Famous with Chip White.